today I'm going to be showing you one of our products called classroom.cloud, which is our 3-in-1 fully cloud-based solution to support schools and trusts with classroom management, supporting their teaching staff in the lesson with additional visibility over their students and control over what they can access and better delivery of lesson content. Online safety, device-based monitoring in keeping with the KICSI guidance and synergizing well with your internet web filters to provide the full level of coverage and security around students. We also then have a range of IT management tools for your technical team, and that can be providing remote support across the school or the trust. It can be scheduled power management of devices to reduce energy costs, full activity logging across the board for staff and student devices, as well as some other bits like acceptable use policies, hardware and software inventory. So every member of staff from school will be accessing the software through our sign-in web portal. That's teachers, DSLs, technicians and administrators. And in here now you're seeing the main dashboard with a load of resources, which is really useful for getting started on if you want to start a 30-day free trial of the software, which is available from the website. Now, down the left-hand side, I've got all the features available to me because I'm logged in as an organizational admin. So depending on what roles members of staff are set up as, they will see different features respectively, i.e. teachers are going to see the classes, DSLs will see the safeguarding, and technicians will see the technical aspects. Just a quick note at the top, there is organization and sites. So in my organization, this can be the trust or, the cluster of schools. And this is where you can centrally manage all members of staff and all devices that you can have visibility over the whole group. And you can see in here the name of the device, the model, the platform, the asset ID, where it's based. So what school is it at, as well as the device group within that school. And then also is the device online, is it in a classroom, etc. See the logged on user, and we've got some great actions here like remote controlling, messaging devices, logging them out, restarting them, power them on and power them off, which I can also do in bulk with these features along the top here. Users, as I mentioned, is how we're going to add our staff into school, but I will just mention as well that all of this can be done on a site level. So we can have multiple sites in here, so we can independently manage these sites, grant people access to only view devices and student data and classes that are within that site. So if I start off with users, when I invite someone, I can put in their email address. I can force them to use their Microsoft or Google accounts because we do have integration options for both of those systems, mostly on the classroom element, pulling through lesson timetable data. So if you've got teachers that want to pull through lessons that are in Microsoft already, they need to use their Microsoft accounts, and that's why we have this option here. Just to kind of reiterate the roles, organizational admin can do everything across all of the sites. A site admin can do everything, but only at their respective sites that they've been granted access to. Teachers, of course, have access to the classes, connecting to the rooms and their students to deliver their lessons better. You can also have combo roles. So you could be a technician and a teacher, such as an IT teacher, who could also then provide remote support around school. But teachers can also be safeguarding trained, of course, as well. So they can have access to the data produced by our monitoring. There are two roles for safeguarding user, safeguarding admin. A safeguarding user is just dealing with incoming safeguarding data, whereas a safeguarding admin is someone that can actually make changes and adjust the behavior of the safeguarding module itself and set up reporting and alerting, etc. Now, just to highlight again with DSLs, for example, you could have a member of the safeguarding team who's just responsible for the one school that they're sat at. However, if you gave them access to all the schools, you've essentially set up a centralized safeguarding team. And this allows them to analyze data produced at each school, as well as run some reports or compare data as a full group, and spot any sort of common trends across the school and keep the data centralized. I'm not going to go too much into the technical side, but in the installer section, we've got support for all the core platforms with guides on how to get them set up and the relevant installation processes. These devices, once the software has been installed, appear in the devices tab here. And the devices is very similar to what I just showed you at the organization level, but only for this respective school. So that's getting our members of staff and our devices up and running on the software. I'm going to start off with classroom management. So teachers will log in, select my classes. They can be a teacher at multiple schools potentially if they've got lessons in one school and another. And then in here, we've got our different tiles for our lessons. There are various ways to set up lessons, one of which I mentioned was pulling through from Microsoft or Google timetables that are already set up. But additionally, there's a range of ways of setting up classes in classroom.cloud, and these are highlighted with the icon here, whereas they would be a Microsoft or a Google icon if it's from your timetable data. If I add a class, I can connect to a device group. Now, this is where you can connect to a specified group of machines, which might be a classroom or IT suite of desktop PCs. It could be a laptop trolley or a collection of iPads, Chromebooks, whatever it might be. And basically, you're connecting to the device and then the respective logged on students in front of you. Additionally, you could do it via a class code, which means for ad hoc lessons, or, lessons where the devices aren't all in one single group or they're not part of a timetable, you can give students this code to enter on the fly. We can also then select directly from the student and device lists available on the system as well. So by clicking on my class, it's going to take me through to this tutor console here, which is showing me obviously what my students are doing, giving me these nice thumbnails, which I can adjust in size depending on how many I've got and how closely I want to look at my students. Very simply, I can double click and open up a viewing window of that student. Now, when I'm viewing this student, I'm obviously just observing what they're doing, keeping an eye on them, making sure they know what they're meant to be doing in my lesson. I can take a screenshot for any positive or negative behavior. I can turn this device off, restart it, or log it out should I need to. And then at the top right, I can enable remote control. So I've now taken control with the cursor. It's really nice and quick. It's a snappy and robust tool. And it's always performed really well in large environments as well. We've got trusts that use it between 5,000-10,000 devices across many schools, and they always give us some really positive feedback on the performance. We've got a remote Windows key, remote control alt delete as well if you need to access Task Manager for any reason on these devices. You might also notice that there is this blue toolbar which has appeared, which is the Net Support Student toolbar. Now, this appears on a student device when I start a lesson with it. So it's a good indicator for the student that they're now in a lesson, which would be pretty obvious if they're in an IT suite with a teacher. But for one-to-one devices, BYOD device setups, it's really nice just to give students that awareness that they are now being connected to and watched. In here, it does also give them access to see learning objectives for today's lesson, what restrictions have been applied to the application of web usage for my class, which I'll show you in a moment. They can request a chat with a teacher, and there is also a help request icon up here as well, so they can ask for help. There's a couple of different options like work completed, need help, or urgent help. If I select OK, that toolbar is going to turn red. Now, that's really useful for a teacher where they've got possibly, 30, 40 of these thumbnails to keep an eye on, and they can quite quickly identify this student needs some support. Up here, I've got a flashing help request showing me that a student has requested help. James needs help, and I can either chat to him and ask him privately, what does he need help with? What's the problem? Or I can press watch and it will go straight back into that viewing window. Now, once I've supported my student with their issue, I can clear that down and it will return to blue. And I've obviously supported that student. Going along the top, these are kind of the quick access tools that teachers will use throughout their lesson pretty on and off, which is locking and unlocking students, very simply gaining attention. A quick thing to note about majority of the features in classroom.cloud from a teacher perspective is that if nobody is selected, it will apply it to everybody. However, I could select just these 2 students and apply a lock to them if I really wanted to, but that goes for most features. Rewards. Students can earn rewards in my lesson, which is particularly useful for younger students in the primary setting. They can earn these stars that appear on their toolbar, and it adds a level of competitiveness to the lesson. And the students will be more engaged if they know that they can earn stars throughout. So if they've answered questions correctly, done a good piece of work, they can earn those points. I've got a one-way message tool, which is really useful. I could say 2 minutes left if I've sent all my students off to go and do their own independent research on a topic. They might have headphones on as well, potentially when they're working. And so this one-way message just gives them the heads up. We've got 2 minutes left before I'm going to take everyone's attention and maybe lock their screens at the same time. The next option is the student toolbar. So it is on by default. You can toggle it off if you don't want it. Alternatively, you can have it off by default and toggle it on if you want it. So that's nice. Quick launch is next, a place for teachers to store useful websites and applications that they're going to be using for their lessons. Very simply, I could select a website like classroom.cloud and launch that. And that's going to open on the default browser for all of my students. And at the beginning of a lesson, just get them straight on task and using what I want them to do. And it just kind of reduces that downtime in a lesson of sending all the students to a website. On the other side, I've got student desktop, which is being able to show and clear the desktop. So if I press show, it will just minimize everything that's open, any open windows on their devices. And just another way of gaining attention without locking them really. But then I can also clear the desktop and it will close all applications that are running on those devices and it will just revert them back to blank, which is a nice thing to do maybe if you're starting a mock exam or something with the students and they don't need any resources open there. And then obviously, again, I can just quick launch some websites or anything like that. The watch feature, this is the same as double clicking on a student, just opens up that same remote viewing window that we were looking at earlier. Share screen, probably one of the most crucial classroom management tools for teachers is being able to broadcast their own screen to all of their students. Now, in here, I've got a couple of options when I do this. I can do it in either a full screen or a windowed mode, and that is how it's displayed at the student. So if it's a full screen, I can lock the mouse and keyboard. The student has no control over their device. They have to watch my demonstration, and obviously they're watching it on their own screen instead of at the front of the lesson. Now, I can also do it in a windowed mode, which does allow them to have the control. And the reason that this is nice is that some students might be confident in what they need to do, and they don't need a demonstration, so they can basically minimize the window and they can crack on with their work, whereas the other students can kind of opt in to watching the demonstration again if they need that extra support. Some teachers have also told me that they have their students work in parallel to their demonstration so they can have both windows side by side, and that's really nice as well. In share screen as well, FYI, when I share it, it will then give me the option for if I want to do a tab, a window, or just an application. Randomly select one or multiple students from my class, and it's going to bounce around. It's going to pick one of the students at random. So in this case, it's selected Sarah. You have been randomly selected. I can ask her a question. She gets it right, she can earn a star. Another couple of ways that this could be useful, not just for quick fire questions, but if I've got, well, in this case, I've got 4 students, I could do it for 2 students and split the classroom into 2 teams, and I could do team-based work, which would be really good as well. And it just kind of removes any sort of bias or anything like that. It's all random. Lesson details shows me is where I, as a teacher, can put in the title of today's lesson, the objectives and the outcomes that the students can see on their toolbar. I can power off devices. I can restart them and log them out again, which I could do on the remote window, but this is in bulk at the end of the lesson. Last lesson of the day, I can just shut all my machines down, although I will show you how that can be scheduled later anyway. Remote logins, so I can remotely log in my devices. Now, this is particularly useful just for generic accounts, if you've got test accounts, or maybe for the youngest students in a primary school that don't have unique credentials. You could log in the whole room as a collective, which is really nice and just saves time. We do have the ability to give teachers the power to reset student passwords. Currently, that supports Azure AD accounts, something we will look to expand at some point in the future, hopefully to local AD accounts as well. But if you've got Azure AD accounts, it's just a great way to save students having to go and find an IT manager or technician to reset their account, or the teacher having to reach out and message that member of staff as well. They can simply do it there and then, and again, reduce downtime and focus on the actual learning of the lesson. Help requests I've already covered, and then refresh. This basically just means if any device drops out of your lesson for any reason, i.e. laptop runs out of power, network cable comes out, something like that, you don't have to end the whole class and start again. You can just simply press refresh and it will re-establish a connection to any of those devices. So that's kind of the quick access tools. Now you can see here I can make things bigger and smaller, scale to fit. I can select all. The reason select all is good is because if you want to basically apply something to everyone bar one, it's easier than obviously just having to go through and click all of them. Because even though the settings do apply to everyone when they're not selected, it's the other way, which is just everyone bar one. You can change the view as well to an icon view or a list view. It's just kind of down to preference. Some people might find it easier to keep an eye on what's going on in their lesson, not from a thumbnail point of view, but what status their devices are in, what restrictions they've applied, and a bit more of a kind of a stripped down view. It's a little bit cleaner when you've got lots of students there to keep an eye on versus smaller kind of thumbnails. You can also remove a student from the lesson as well. If a student, leaves your lesson for any reason, maybe they're ill and they go home, you can remove their device out of your classroom just to reduce the clutter there. There is also this nice groups icon, so you might be able to spot that I've got an extra group here called additional support. Now there are groups you can create several if you want to, and maybe even relating to that random select where I've split my students in half to team A and team B, I could split this up as well. And this allows you to view just a certain group of students that have been applied in that group. So I've got a group here for additional support. If these students have identified that they're not very confident, they need a little bit more help in my lesson, I can now broadcast my screen or quickly launch the resources they need to be using just to them without interfering with the rest of the class. It's also a nice way to keep an eye on any students that maybe misbehave quite regularly. Again, trying to keep an eye on 30 or 40 of these thumbnails can be challenging, so being able to just quickly flick across to view those ones is really useful. Down the left-hand side here, I've got app monitoring and web monitoring. They both work very much the same way. They utilize an approved and a restricted level of application or website. It will also show you the application they are currently running, as well as everything that's open in background on the device. And essentially, I'm going to have an approved only restriction or a block restricted. So perfect example really is blocking a calculator in a maths lesson. We're not blocking anything other than the calculator. Or on the flip side, I can use approved only. And if there's a particular piece of software, like maybe a bit of coding software or graphic design that you're using in your lesson, if that's the only thing that the students need to be using, you can put it in your approved list, enforce that setting there, and you know that the students can only use what you've specified for them. Exactly the same for web monitoring. What websites are they using? What other tabs have they got open so they can't hide anything? And then I've got approved and restricted lists. I can also remotely launch websites and applications from these lists, similar to the quick launch feature up there. I can also actually turn the internet off altogether with websites, and it's not the physical internet connection to the device, it's just the usage of a web browser. What I can also do is if I see a student on a website, I can right click and I can add that website to either list. It might be a really good learning resource and I can add it to my approved list for future usage, or I can add it to the restricted list because it might quite clearly be them playing games or looking at something that they shouldn't. So if I now apply this approved only setting, the green shield has highlighted now that approved websites are only allowed. And if I go back to my student and open up this device, you can see it says internet restrictions are now applying. So if I go into this student and I just access YouTube, which we know, which we know is a restricted website. I'll enter that in there and then it will try and go to YouTube, but then it will come up saying, sorry, you can't go to YouTube. However, one thing that's quite cool when we add in the approved websites, sorry, my virtual environment's a little bit slow here. Because we've done approved websites, it will actually, instead of just telling them they can't access this website, we will actually redirect them to the websites I've specified for my class. Now, if I close that and I click here on the internet option, it will also link my student to all the available resources I want them to use for my lesson. So as much the tool isn't just about blocking what they can do, it's also about, keeping them on task and using the correct resources. The next tool is the survey tool. So I can start a survey with my students. Now I can do a quick survey, which is just an off-the-cuff question, give them some responses using the predefined ones here, or even custom responses where I can separate my different options with a comma and you can give them whatever options you'd like. I can also create a new survey, which means that it will save it for future reference. I can use it over and over again if it's a regular question you want to ask the students. And there's also a couple of predefined ones in here from us. How are you today? Are you confident in the topic we just covered? And I really like this tool because you can use it to gauge where people are up to. So if I send that survey out now, all the students will get that. I can very quickly jump in and just answer that on a couple of students. And you can see from a teacher perspective that it is really snappy with opening up student devices and answering these questions, taking control of them. So here we go. We've got the survey results now. It's 50-50 split, and the color coded dots are going to highlight for us how each student answered. Now, this question is great because you could ask the students, which bit are you not confident in? What do I need to cover again? And I can stick them in an additional support group and follow up with them specifically. It also means that if you were to ask them a question like, how are you today? You could use it as a well-being tool. It's a good way at the start of the lesson to identify are any students having a bad day. If they're maybe a little bit quiet, not engaging with you quite as much, that might be why, and maybe don't push too hard on questions and things like that, and you can follow up with the student at the end. But also if you're doing a question which is what's your favorite subject at school, and the students will answer the different subjects, you could kind of bounce it around and have a bit of a class discussion. James, why do you think maths is the best? Kerry, you think English is better, and why is that? And depending on the question, you can show all the students the results of how their peers answered, and it just kind of prompts an extra level of discussion and engagement from your students. The chat tool again, so the students have the option to open up a chat. However, you can disable it because a lot of teachers don't like the students being able to just open chats with them whenever they want. So even if you turn that off on the student end, the teacher still has the ability to chat with the student. And then lastly, there is a little bit of device control. You can mute the sound on devices to basically stop them from listening to music or watching videos. And if they're on laptops, the sound coming out can be disruptive in your lesson. So you can mute those devices. You can also block the webcams again on those kind of laptop devices. Potentially, if you've got any remote lessons as well, blocking the webcams might be used at times to stop students messing around on camera. We do have the ability to block USBs. However, I'll be completely honest, it shouldn't really be a classroom-based restriction. It should be a site-wide policy, something that we are looking to expand upon, and it's possibly highly likely that you've got something in place that already does that. So that's the classroom management, and it's really useful. It's really quick and snappy. Also, I can right click on devices and have quick access to a lot of those features that I mentioned earlier. And also, I think that the UI is very simplistic and inviting, especially for people who aren't particularly technical. And there is a little bit of a barrier sometimes to schools introducing new software, which is how much time am I going to have to spend training staff on this? And personally, I think being able to lock students, quickly launch websites, share my screen, and turn the internet off in just a couple of clicks there and jump on a student to see what they're doing is incredibly easy. And I think it would be a great tool for teachers to pick up pretty quickly. So that's the teacher portion. I'm now going to talk about safeguarding. So Safeguarding, there's a lot of pressure in schools around safeguarding at the moment, driven quite heavily by the KICSI guidance and the emphasis on device-based monitoring. Majority of schools all have internet filtering in place and have done for many years, and that has always kind of been considered a tick in the box as far as safeguarding goes. Now, the emphasis is coming because obviously there's a lot that students can do on these devices which isn't on a web browser. They could be typing messages into an email, into a chat somewhere to a fellow student. They could be typing something concerning, even just into a Word document, and that stuff all needs to be picked up on. Additionally, there are websites they can access which would be deemed appropriate, and just because it's an appropriate website, they get access via the web filter, but what they then type into that website might be concerning, and for a lot of schools that might be in the Google Workspace or the 365 environment. They're all approved websites, but what are they typing in there? Now, our device monitoring, how does it work? The software is installed on the device and it is capturing anything that the student types, copy and paste, or contained within the title of a web page. Because if there's a concern word in the title of the web page, it might be that the student has received a link. So they haven't themselves typed in this concerning word, but obviously the website contains it, and we trigger that in the same way we do as if they did type it. You can also monitor staff in the exact same way with this. Plenty of schools do, but it is optional if you're going to be monitoring staff devices. Something just to highlight, I should actually go back very quickly to my student device in the class to show you this, but we also have concerns. Now, concerns are actually raised by students themselves. So let me just very quickly enter my classroom again. I forgot to mention that bit. When I open up my student device here, close the website there is a desktop shortcut you can put on your student devices called Report a Concern. And if a student opens that, they can enter in their name, tell us what's concerning them. Maybe they're being bullied, maybe they've got problems at home, or maybe they're concerned about a fellow student. And they can actually choose the member of the safeguarding team that they'd like to send this to. Now, that's really nice because it just means that they can obviously raise and make you aware of problems that they have, which does tie in with prevent duty, giving students the ability to reach out about their problems. And I think it's just quite a nice tool to enable. Now, phrase matching is kind of the bit I was talking about with the monitoring, the device monitoring all the time. So there's quite a lot of information here. We do give you an awful lot of visibility over what students are doing on your devices. First and foremost, we are going to display who was logged on at the time. And each one of these is a scenario or an instance of a student typing in something concerning or searching on a website that is concerning. So what credentials did they use to log in? What device were they on? Mine say deleted because I'm using virtual machines, but yours will tell you, was it a desktop in IT Suite 1? Was it a laptop? Was it one of their one-to-one devices? Safeguarding groups. These are custom groups that you can create within your school. Typical examples would be year groups. It means that you can filter and report on data via based on their age, what year group they're in. But you could also create a group for vulnerable students. And again, you can kind of report and review on this data specifically against vulnerable students. And also a lot of the system can be customized. So you could increase the risk levels against certain keywords and phrases for vulnerable students. It could be that the alerts for where the high severity phrases go to someone who deals specifically with vulnerable students. There's a lot of options there to customize. So where is this device situated? What room or group is it a part of? What school is it a part of? Again, if you're a DSL centrally for a trust, you can manage safeguarding data across multiple schools, and it's very key to know what school that student's from. It will show you the source and where they triggered it or how they triggered it. So this one's on Google, this one's on Notepad, but if I hover here, it will show me that that was actually a typed keyword. So this student has typed it. However, this one is a web page title. So that's a Google search for this. The student probably has typed it in this scenario. However, we've actually triggered the keyword being in the web page title. It's going to show you the keyword that's matched. Now, our safeguarding has a phrase library of over 20,000 phrases with 20 different supported languages. So basically, we cover a really wide range of keywords, slang terms, acronyms, and obviously the other languages to give you a really well-rounded coverage. We work with Internet Watch Foundation, lots of independent charities, and also all of our global existing customers of this software report back to us the keywords that they use, that they've added in themselves. You can add in your own keywords to the software. That's great. But also that then reports back to us for review and we add them in if we see fit. Every time we release a new version of the software, you get the latest keywords, so you don't have to worry about manually updating things. It's going to show us the time and date, of course, of when the student actually triggered this alert. It's important to know what lesson were they in, were they in school? Maybe it was a device that went home with them. Was it done? Was it done in the evening? Outside of school. Plenty of visibility there, and then also when was it last updated? So this will be a really useful tool for the DSLs to keep track of how regularly a certain incident has been updated. So these ones say never. They're brand new to us. Nobody's dealt with them as of yet, so they're probably ones that we need to prioritize. And I can sort my list by that and tackle those ones that haven't been actioned for a while. I'm going to go back over to the left hand side here now, which is the low, medium, high, and urgent severity levels. These are based on the keywords themselves, so certain words carry an additional weight. High severity words, I've got a group of them here. These will basically trigger and capture a screenshot of the student device when they trigger this word. So you'll be able to see exactly what they were doing at the time. And obviously that's just good for visibility over what they're doing and help you to review the situation. Now, on top of that, we do go a step further. I do think this is one of the most powerful features within the tool, and that is for these urgent severity words, we also get a video capture. This will record 50 seconds of the student desktop, 25 seconds before the keyword and 25 seconds after the keyword. And it's really great because that 25 seconds is almost retrospective monitoring there. What did they do building up to this keyword? What did they do afterwards is critical. Did they very quickly delete what they typed in because they realized that it was a mistake and they'd done something wrong? Did they actually access a website relating to that topic to find out more information? Maybe they're in a chat with another student on a Teams chat. You might actually get the following couple of messages as well to give you more clarity on what they're discussing and whether it really is a concern for us. Additionally, that video is great evidence for you as well. So if you ever have to get a member of staff involved, not a member of staff, sorry, a parent involved, to tell them about what their child has been doing, then you've obviously got a video clip to back up the case as well, because they might say my student would never do something like that, and obviously you've got a video there for it. So yeah, we capture a lot of information. Now, if I take one of these as an example, I'm going to use this one. This opens up our review window. So again, it's going to show us what did they type and when, the severity level, who was the student. All of our words are categorized. So bullying, drugs, self-harm, etc. I'll show you all the categories in just a moment. The source. So this one was done on Notepad, but if it was done on a website, it would actually link you to the website. And again, you might not know what that website is, and looking at that website will help you review and understand the situation. It might be a concerning website for a concerning topic that they're getting more information about. However, it could also be the latest Xbox game that just happens to have a bit of a keyword in the name of the game that is naturally a concern, but that would therefore be a false positive. The device and where it's based, so the safeguarding group they're a part of would highlight, what age is this student, are they vulnerable, etc. It will give you a description of what the words mean. Nobody's going to know what all 20,000 keywords in the software mean, and so the description there is very handy. We then have status and notes. So all the words come in as new as to begin with, and this little icon over here next to the safeguarding module will show you how many new phrases there are to deal with to keep on top of things. When you've started dealing with it, reviewing the situation, following up, it's in progress. Once you've completed what you need to do, you've followed up with that student, you've identified, it was a concern and they won't do it again, it's completed. Or if you've reviewed it and it's not a concern for us, we can mark it as a false alarm. You can see all of the status changes by your safeguarding team, which allows people to be efficient in working through similar data sets. You don't want people stepping on each other's toes. You want this to be as effective and efficient as possible. So I can see that Dan is already dealing with this. I can move on to a different scenario. I could also leave custom notes. So I could say speaking to parents, and that's going to be the next note there that somebody else can identify. The screenshot in there, not probably the most realistic screenshot of what you're going to see on your student devices. That's just me basically adding in a load of safeguarding data in a notepad. But then there's also the video here. So as I say, when I get to the 25-second mark, the student has typed in that keyword, and there we go. But then what do they do afterwards? I've typed in more, but that just gives you so much visibility and context over what the student was doing. You can download that video as well if you want to export it. Risk analysis. This is really cool. So the severity levels of low, medium, high, and urgent are based on the keyword. So it's just the word at face value. How inappropriate or concerning do we deem that word? Now you can go and change the severity level of all the words. So it is fully customizable, just to highlight that. So certain words could be raised to the high severity, and that will give them the screenshot from now on. That is up to you. But risk analysis, this is taking into account additional factors to give you an understanding of how risky do we deem this particular scenario. First and foremost, was it a supervised device? This goes hand in hand with the classroom management I showed you earlier. So if a device was in a classroom, students will figure out pretty quickly they're being monitored and being watched. So they're not going to do anything that they know will get them in trouble until they're not being supervised. Therefore, if any of this safeguarding data is produced on a device that isn't in a classroom scenario, it could be a device that's gone home with a student, etc., or in a common room, then that would get a higher score on this risk analysis. You can mark websites and applications as low, medium, and high risk. Examples I give of high risk websites could be social media, more likely to come across bullying and other harmful content, but then also maybe support websites, things like Talk to Frank, Childline, those kind of websites. Again, if students trigger safeguarding data in those websites, naturally that does carry an extra weight. An urgent keyword is going to get a higher score than a low word, and that score of 12 is pretty much made up by it being an urgent keyword and nothing else. But also historical incidents. Has this student triggered multiple keywords today? And also, has this student triggered multiple keywords from the same category this week? There's a few variants on this one. If you've got a student that triggers 10 different drug-related phrases over a week, that will naturally boost their score and carry an additional level of concern and risk over a student that's just triggered the one phrase by mistake. And a lot of schools will sort by this risk column to identify those concerning topics and cases first. At the top here, I've got the ability to export this data, so I can copy it to plain text. I can compile it into an email and raise it to, SLT, head teacher, or even students' parents, maybe. I can print it off and send it to a PDF as well if I need to. And then additionally, whilst I can't see it here, I will just mention very importantly that there is the ability to integrate with CPOMs and My Concern, which is very common amongst schools for keeping safeguarding records of all students, not just on a technical basis, but just on a day-to-day behavioural, home life kind of information about the student. And being able to take any concerning action or anything raised within our safeguarding data, being able to export that straight into those systems keeps everything under one roof. And makes a DSL's life much easier, that they don't have to manually enter anything. They can just pick one of these and send it directly in there. So that's how you can review data. Now, there's loads of ways that you can change the way you're viewing it. I can change what fields I can view within this database. I can sort by any of these columns as well, but this is actually sorting just within the groups here. So I've got it grouped by category. I can basically group by bullying phrases, then drug phrases, then self-harm, etc. But instead, I could do it on a user basis. And now it's going to group all of my safeguarding data by the logged on username or credentials. And that basically means that James could be using several different devices around school, but I'm going to keep all of his data again logged against his logon, and then Kerry and then Sarah and all of their data. I could do it by my own custom safeguarding groups, i.e. the ages of those students. I could do it by the status. I could do it by the day and do it chronologically. I could do it by anything really. In there as well, I'm going to put it back to category. In there as well, we can filter. So I could say, look, just show me the new and in progress phrases, because completed and false alarm, whilst we want to keep a record of them in the system, we don't need to look at those immediately because they've kind of been dealt with. There are different categories, so I could say I just want to look at the suicide, self-harm, well-being categories. Here's all the other ones that we've got, and immediately that's cut down my data now to a subset of information which is really key for me to have a look at, and I can identify that very quickly. I can also do, did they type it, did they copy and paste it, was it an urgent, high, medium or low word? The risk score, I could look at just urgent risk cases, based on that score out of 100. And then I can say, if I'm part of the central team, just show me data produced by this one school or these two schools or all the schools in the group. I could also then say, let me just look at a particular age range or device group. I can do date and time ranges of today, yesterday, this week, or months. And I can even do the time of day that this was produced. And this is really good because you might want to compare, if you do send devices home with students that are school-owned devices that you're monitoring, you might want to compare data produced in school versus when they're at home. And you might get some slightly more authentic student data when they're at home with devices instead of in school. So lots of ways of doing that. Now, this list is really good for, kind of grouping them, and kind of acknowledging, I guess, your workload for the day by sorting by the last updated or the priority scores. But when it comes to analysis, and trying to spot trends amongst your safeguarding data, it's a lot easier to do with the phrase cloud. Now, this phrase cloud will highlight all the keywords that are being triggered across your group of devices and students. And basically, the bigger the word, the more times it has been triggered. So if I hover over the word, it shows me how many times that word is triggered, and it will allow you to spot, with potentially large amounts of data, the really keywords and topics and categories that students are discussing most. And if I click on this word, it's going to show me every time a student has triggered that word, and when, on what device and where. And if I press view, I've got this review window again, but I've actually got these 3 phrases in a queue, so I can go down that list and deal with each of those. Now, it's also a good way to spot possible words that are clearly going to be false positives. There will be false positives with any safeguarding solution. And if there's a word in there which keeps getting triggered, but it's not a concern, you could click on that word, probably not weapons in this scenario, but you can bulk change the status of phrases to false alarm if you want to, and leave a note if you're confident that none of those are actually a concern for you. I can also do it on certain topics. So you could say that you want to have a crackdown on drugs, amongst the schools potentially, and you want to see what keywords are being triggered and who's triggering them. So I can see and identify this word is being triggered more so, who's talking about it, and at what school. A lot of multi-academy trusts that we work with, for example, will do a phrase cloud per week per school and compare those trending topics and commonly used phrases amongst the schools. There are also these nice interactive graphs that we can use. So I can highlight, here's all my suicide related terms, here's my bullying related terms, and you can still put in obviously date and time ranges or over a subset of students or devices, etc. I could do it by day, and I could identify, right, this day has triggered far more data than the other days. Why is that? What is being discussed? Is it a lesson that has naturally produced some false positives based on the topic, or is it actually 2 students having a conversation about something inappropriate? I could also do it by user and see if there's any students in there that stand out as triggering more data than the rest. Do I need to pull them out of a lesson? Do I need to have a conversation with them, etc., and make sure that they're supported and safe? One thing I did forget to mention on this main screen, which is really important, is this search tool. I love this tool. Basically, you can search for any piece of content contained within this database here. So I could type in Sarah, and it will bring me up all of Sarah's data that is grouped by category still. I could type in Notepad, and it will be every piece of data captured just on Notepad. It could even be a keyword, and we could see every time that keyword was triggered, who by and when, on what device, at what school. So it's so easy to find any piece of information you need, as well as analyzing it as a collective. Now, I'm just going to very quickly mention the settings in safeguarding, and also to highlight that all of these settings that I'm going to show here can be applied to the different safeguarding groups I mentioned. So you can adjust keywords for the age of the students. You can adjust who the report of concern contacts are for the age of the student. Safeguarding alerts. If you've got key stage 1 and key stage 2, you could have alerts for key stage 1 go to this member of staff, and key stage 2 go to this member of staff. Um, it also means that there are things like time settings. I'm going to talk about time settings because this is when the phrase monitoring is active. Now, if it's personal devices, student-owned devices, you might not monitor them after school hours. That's up to you. You can put in term dates as well. You can also put in IP addresses and wireless networks. Now, this is really cool because if students are using mobile devices, let's say they are BYOD devices, if they're coming into school and connecting to our Wi-Fi, we're going to monitor everything that they look at while they're on our Wi-Fi. However, the moment that they leave school and they're not on site and they're not connected to our Wi-Fi, we won't monitor them. Now, if it's a school-owned device, it will probably be monitored 24/7, even if it does go home. But you want to apply these settings not necessarily to the whole school, because there's obviously plenty of devices that won't go home with students, and we want them to be monitored all the time. So that's where you can split settings and where they're applied to. Phrase and keyword list. We can see in here every single keyword in the software and what we're monitoring for. So you can see the severity level of all the keywords and what they mean. And any of these I can click on and I can change. You could also change a whole category by bulk if you wanted to, adjust descriptions, and also add in your own keywords and phrases. That's really good. Keyword settings. One other thing I haven't mentioned is Teams integration. Now, it's not an additional cost, but Teams integration is available. And that means that if a student logs in to a Microsoft Teams account on an unmanaged device that doesn't have our software installed on it, if they log into Teams, let's say on their grandma's computer, they start typing horrible things into your Teams environment, we can still pick up on that through your Teams tenancy. We won't be able to tell you, obviously, like details about the device or get a screenshot because the software isn't there, but it is an extra level of coverage in those environments. Here is where you can also include additional language packs as well. You can adjust the apps and websites and their risk and whether they're monitored. Report of concern we covered. Basically, you can just select who is a report of concern contact and enable it for the student devices. Safeguarding alerts is email alerts, and I can basically say if a student triggers an urgent severity word under a certain category like self-harm, suicide, well-being, obviously very important, that's now going to email all of these specified users. I can select multiple here, but it's just me in my environment. And you can have various email alerts for various people, based on different criteria. We can also do scheduled reports. So I could create a new report based on phrase matches, and I could send it to all these users, and I could do it daily at 8:45, 9:15. I could do it weekly on a Monday at this time, or I could do it monthly on a certain date. And that basically means anytime, or it's going to give me a report of urgent severity phrases from a certain category that are all typed in words, and they're all new. So now every week on a Monday, I'm going to get a report and a breakdown of every time an urgent suicide related phrase was typed in that's brand new from a certain group of users or devices. You can set up again as many of those as you like, and it's a great way to just make people aware and instantly access a new report that they've got there. The email alerts, it just means that somebody is always aware of anything that's going on, and it will say this student on this device in this class has triggered this word on this website. Click here to review it, and it will take you straight into our safeguarding console to open up that review window of that particular incident. So I think that's just about everything covered on the safeguarding front. Couple of little final bits to mention. I won't take too much longer, but there is a feature which is actually a technician feature, but I think it's a good supplement to safeguarding, and that is the activity monitoring. So this will show you an entire breakdown of everybody's application, website usage across the board, as well as what devices they've used. So login history of different devices. This is a good supplement to safeguarding because if a student has a really severe situation that you want to obviously review and follow up with them. It might be that you want to pull off a report of their internet history for the last month. Has there been any websites in there that are equally concerning for us, and add to the context of this particular case? That's really useful, as well as just day-to-day monitoring. Now, people also use this day-to-day monitoring for staff, make sure that staff are not looking at anything inappropriate during work hours. Login history is great. If any devices go missing or they get damaged, who was the last person to use them? Stuff like that. You've also got the ability to search here still, by the way. So I could type in Sarah Kent as my student, and I've got all of her data, and I can put in a date and time range or active time as well. So I can choose to exclude anything that is less than a minute on the active time, because if it's less than a minute, I'm not really that bothered, and it can kind of reduce the clutter in there for the real kind of timely bits. Inventory, full hardware and software inventory. I can customize this ribbon, but it's going to show me the asset ID, where it's based, the OS version of the device, storage, free space, CPU, serial number, all that good stuff. And I can click on a device here and it's going to show me a full system breakdown of the hardware, as well as the software of what's installed, the version of that piece of software, and when it was also installed on that device. I can also still carry out remote support from here as well. Remote control, message, log out, restart, power on, power off. These are grayed out just because they're old kind of virtual machines in this environment. I can also look at software across the board, so number of installs across all the machines. I can see how many of my devices have Microsoft Edge installed and which devices are they. So that's really useful. Acceptable use policies can be applied at the site or the organization. I could add in a policy for students or staff and say, here's a set of rules that you have to agree to every time you log in on the device, or just once per user. And the acknowledgement is either a tick box or entering their name. You can have it that they have to basically accept this policy or they don't get access to the device, and that means that as well you've got a set of rules that students and staff have agreed to prior to using your devices. So that could be misuse from a safeguarding point of view, but also just general misuse of devices, damage, and how they use it. So that covers nearly everything. Last little bit is just about power management. I can basically schedule devices to come on at a certain time, turn off at a certain time, and I can also introduce an inactivity policy, which says after X amount of time, if a device is logged on and it's not been used for that long, we're going to log it off or shut it down, suspend it. If it's a logged off device, I'm just going to suspend it or shut it down. That's really nice, and it's the same with the power off command. You can stagger this as well to reduce network load. You can also put in term dates, obviously, so it doesn't happen during half term or summer holidays. You can also exclude certain devices as well. If certain members of staff work later and you know that, you can exclude them and they're just responsible for their own device being turned off. We've also just recently added in internet restrictions. So I can enable restrictions and I can say I've got websites which are approved and restricted, and I can choose the hours that they are restricted. So I can enable it on the school hours, and I can basically say I want a block restricted enforced for this amount of time, and I can maybe do it again. And I could say either side of the lunch hour you've got unrestricted access, but during lesson time and through the day I'm going to block these certain websites, and that could be social media sites, which again could be applied to members of staff as well, just to prevent them from accessing social media when they're meant to be working, something like that. I think that just about covers everything. There are little bits and bobs I haven't covered, but just want to kind of explain again that I think the software is a great balance between really wide range of features and obviously crucially supporting Kixi, as well as teaching staff. But it's also really simplistic at the same time, and I think that's why it's great from every school's perspective, and Multi-Academy Trust is, whilst it can support primaries and easy to use, easy to set up, it can also support secondary schools, technical colleges, universities and such, and we've got some really great evidence of that on our website with our case studies as well. So yep, I think that's just about everything from me. I don't think I've missed anything, but yeah,